July 20th, 1994.
It has amateur stargazers and top astronomers watching the heavens in wonder.
I'm never going to see anything like this ever again.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh my God.
That's it.
Look at that.
A dying comet is smashing into Jupiter, leaving Earth-sized holes in its wake. And a question: could it happen here?
The projectile would scream down through the atmosphere, strike the surface, and explode with an energy of millions of megatons, larger than all the nuclear arsenals of Earth put together.
Tonight, a cosmic collision and a look back 25 years at the Apollo 11 moon landing.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This is ABC News Nightline. Now reporting from the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., Ted Koppel.
One of the first pieces of history impressed upon me as a child growing up in England was the Battle of Hastings. And now you're going to have to bear with me because the script that I wrote is not moving along, so I'll have to read it from my script here. The Norman king, William, forever after known in English history as William the Conqueror, paid his unexpected and uninvited visit to the British Isles. William defeated the forces of King Harold, and the English language has never been the same since. What I didn't know back then, and what my English history teachers may have been too sporting to mention, was the appearance in the year 1066 of Halley's Comet. Yes, we've finally gotten around to the subject. Comets, as everybody knows, have always been portents of disaster. Unless, of course, you were rooting for the French in 1066, in which case it would have been a portent of victory and triumph. I know that everyone with a telescope is just ecstatic these days that mountain-sized fragments, in itself a painful collision of concepts, that mountain-sized fragments of a comet are bashing into the far side of Jupiter. Scientists are no longer interpreting this sort of thing as an omen of disaster, but beyond giving astronomers something interesting to do with their evenings, it is not altogether clear what useful information is being produced by this phenomenon. Which is why, at times like this, I turn to my colleague, ABC science correspondent Michael Gillen, who is at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Michael?
Ted, we begin this evening with the most extraordinary picture. It was released just minutes ago, and you can see it here over my right shoulder. It's the first color image of the comet-scarred planet Jupiter, taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, that big scar towards the bottom is the most prominent alteration to the face of the planet since Galileo first laid eyes on it back in 1609. How prominent? Well, that big scar may look small to you, but it's bigger than our entire planet, bigger than the planet Earth. With historic pictures like this, it's no wonder that astronomers are jumping out of their skin with excitement. It's all a little weird when you think about it. Astronomers worldwide are cheering while Jupiter is being pummeled. The latest pictures just released show this dramatic impact, so bright it blinded the camera, and this frame-by-frame chronicle of one of the biggest impacts to date.
When the first piece went in, and we saw a gigantic plume sticking out of the side of Jupiter, and then we saw a big black splotch, it was just blown away, absolutely blown away.
And to see these massive explosions has just been the most fantastic ride.
The comets are hitting the backside of Jupiter, but as this photo sequence shows, the fireballs are rising so high into the air, major telescopes can easily see them. Some of the scars are so big that where there are clear skies, even people with small telescopes have a chance of seeing them. Astronomers all over the world have rallied like never before, documenting the cosmic collisions in every possible light, from the infrared to the ultraviolet.
Well, we get different information from different colors. At visible wavelengths, we see what Jupiter looks like with our eye, or what it would look like to us if we were there. In the ultraviolet, we're sensing much higher in the atmosphere, so we can tell, if it's a high cloud or deep cloud. In the infrared, we're looking at heat, how hot the planet is.
The comet collisions are happening 400 million miles away, but they're telling us a lot about our own world. For years, Scientists have theorized that an all-out nuclear war would throw so much smoke and debris into the air, it would blot out the sun and freeze the Earth to death. This so-called nuclear winter effect is also blamed for killing off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago when a comet or asteroid hit the Earth. Until this week, it was only a theory. But now, for the first time ever, we have direct visual evidence that such a catastrophe could actually have occurred. This comet fragment is about 1.5 miles across, a mere speck compared to the size of Jupiter. And yet, early Monday morning, when that speck hit the atmosphere, it produced an explosion thousands of miles into space and a scar, this black eye, bigger than the Earth itself.
These guys are 1 or 2 kilometers that are hitting Jupiter, and one of them is bigger than that. And the asteroid comet that hit the Earth 65 million years ago and knocked off the dinosaurs was 10 kilometers. It's only a factor of several larger.
Pictures of the comets now pounding Jupiter confirm that while comets can take life, they can also give life.
Comets are composed mostly of ice, frozen gases, including water, and it's believed that much of the Earth's atmosphere, much of the water in the Earth, actually probably came from comets raining down on the Earth 2, 3, 4 billion years ago.
They may even have brought more complex organic molecules out of which life actually arose. So we're related to comets in a very direct sense.
Gene Shoemaker, along with wife Carolyn and amateur astronomer David Levy, discovered their headline-grabbing comet last year at Southern California's Palomar Observatory. It happened when Carolyn was scanning 3D pictures of Jupiter and its surroundings.
In this case, what I could see was a bar. It looked like a bar of light with coma and tail coming off on one side. And I've never seen a comet that looked like that.
And within a few days, even better images were taken that showed up to 21 discrete little nuclei all along that bar. And that's when they were called a string of pearls.
Comet Shoemaker-Levy probably originated in something called the Oort cloud, a storehouse of comets trillions of miles away. For eons, the comet must have drifted inward, picking up speed. In the early 1970s, it was nabbed by Jupiter's strong gravity and eventually torn apart. At that point, the head-on collision was inevitable.
I've sort of fantasized most of my career that I might actually get to see an impact of a comet or an asteroid sometime, thinking the odds were extremely low, and they are. And by golly, it's going to happen. So it's a sort of a fulfillment of a dream, if you will, for me, although it's a bit of a disappointment for Carolyn because she's going to lose her string of pearls here.
The last of the comet pieces are due to hit Jupiter in the wee hours of Friday morning Eastern Time. But it won't be the last time Jupiter is bombarded. The same goes for the Earth.
The chance of such a civilization-threatening collision in the next century is 1 in 1,000. Now, that 1 in 1,000 is pretty high. You probably wouldn't travel on a commercial airliner if the chance of dying was 1 in 1,000.
The good news, says NASA astronomer David Morrison, is that if this were us instead of Jupiter, we could have deflected the comet with a nuclear missile. The bad news, spelled out in this recent scientific article, is that we are not prepared.
Only a few astronomers are engaged in the search for potentially threatening comets and asteroids. In fact, the total number of people working on this problem is less than the staff of one McDonald's.
The thing about the Shoemakers is they are one of the 3 or 4 little groups of astronomers who, more or less on their own, are finding these near-Earth asteroids. But we need a significant program. This is a serious issue.
And talk about a serious problem, Ted. In about 2 hours, Jupiter is facing a triple whammy. 3 fragments are expected to hit the planet in roughly the same area. It promises to be a fitting finale for a fireworks show the likes of which humanity has never seen before.
Michael, forget about Jupiter for a moment. I want to pick up on what Carl Sagan was talking about. 1 chance in 1,000, is that really the consensus in the scientific community?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the calculations, that's the most frequent it can possibly be. There's an uncertainty in the calculations. It's anywhere from 1 every 10,000 years down to one every 1,000 years. But yeah, that likely.
All right, stand by if you would. We'll be back with you in a moment. When we return, however, astronomer Richard Berenson will tell us why watching fragments of a comet colliding into Jupiter is like seeing Earth's past and future.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by MCI.
Hi, I'm Chris Columbia with MCI. As you can see, we're celebrating our new Friends and Family 2 savings program with its huge 40% savings. There's another. Hang on a second. Could you quiet down, please? I want to tell them the rest. There's another wonderful part to Friends and Family 2. When you join, not only do you save 40% on calls to the MCI customers you choose, you also save 20% on calls to anyone you choose, no matter which long-distance company they're with.
An automotive model year-end closeout must have balloons. So here are some balloons. And there must be a catchy jingle, so here's the jingle. Of course, all of this isn't for your ordinary model year-end closeout. It's for Acura, the best-selling luxury import in America. But still, even your local Acura dealer isn't above having a good old-fashioned model year-end blowout.
Is he a friendly coworker or a sexually abusive male? Is she dressing for success or something else? Real cases from the sexual harassment battlefield.
It's almost as if there's a sign saying, no girls allowed.
Have things gone too far? You decide. Prime time, Thursday.
There's only one place in Nashville that's given more people their start than any other. The only hospital trusted enough to deliver and care for over half the babies born in Middle Tennessee each year. And everywhere you look, our experience shows. Baptist Hospital, so much for so many.
In the race for Congress, he stands apart from the crowd. Harold Byrd. Born in rural McNairy County, he worked the family farm. Harold Byrd, raised on family values, faith, hard work. Harold Byrd, a farmer and small businessman, he's created hundreds of jobs. Harold Byrd. In Congress, he'll fight to crack down on welfare fraud, put gang leaders in jail, no pay raises, no perks. Harold Byrd for Congress, a breath of fresh air.
Richard Berenson is a professor of physics and astronomy at the American University in Washington, D.C. He joins us from the Space Telescope Science Institute Center in Baltimore, and we are joined again by ABC Science correspondent Michael Gillen. I'm at the Naval Observatory, and given my lack of knowledge about this subject, it's probably appropriate that Jupiter is out there, and this 100-year-old telescope behind me is probably the only one in the country, if not the world, pointed in that direction. Richard, pick up for a moment and tell me why it is and how it is that what we're seeing happening on Jupiter now is going to help us understand our own past and indeed our own future.
Well, it won't even give us Teflon or Tang, but what it will do is tell us something about what happened 65 million years ago when the large, ponderous animals here on Earth, the things which would still perhaps be the dominant intelligent beings, were killed off. And about 75% of the species of the Earth perished. What happened? Well, we think that a very large object hit, probably in the Yucatan of Mexico, probably an asteroid instead of a comet. Whatever it was colossal. Could it happen again? Indeed it could, and it's even happening now with Jupiter. So it does tell us about our own beginnings.
All right, so much for the past. Now what about the future?
Well, it's going to happen again. Now, let's bear in mind that about half of our cells are made up of water, and comets, after all, are dirty icebergs. And so some of the water brought to our planet Earth billions of years ago came in the comets. And when you're getting a drink of water next time, just realize, in part, you're drinking a comet. And in the core of that comet was also carbon-based material. We ourselves are organic matter, so we are, in a way, made of comets. Well, there have been a number of predictions made about how likely it is that we're going to be hit again. In 1908, something mysterious, probably a comet, hit Siberia in Russia. And it was quite an explosion. Of course, there were very few people around, but it killed thousands of reindeer and leveled tens of thousands of trees. It was about a 1 megaton explosion. The chances are very high that we'll be hit with something like that in the next century.
Michael Gillen, it was suggested in your report a moment ago that potentially these comets hitting the planet Jupiter have the capacity of creating life. Just pick up on that a moment, would you?
Back in 1986, when we took very close-up photos of Halley's Comet, in particular with the Giotto spacecraft, we found that the comet and other comets later contained enormous amounts of organic material. That is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. These are the seeds of life, if you will, the essential chemicals that are needed to make life. And ever since then, we've become convinced to some degree that because we believe comets were pelting the planets as they were being formed 4 billion years ago, that it was inevitable that these planets would be scattered with the seeds of life, and therefore it gave rise to this theory that we basically owe our existence to comets. It's quite extraordinary.
Richard, as they are, I guess, everywhere around the country and indeed everywhere around the world, the scientists here at the Naval Observatory are, if not quite physically jumping up and down, they're very excited about this. What is it about these pictures that they are able to see that is going to provide such a wealth of information in the months and years ahead?
Ted, this is unique. In all of human history, this is the first time we've ever been privileged to see such a cosmic collision. We know these things have happened before. Just look at the heavily cratered surface of the moon. And after all, the moon is very close to the Earth, so the Earth has been hit many times in the past as well. You can only go to the northern part of Arizona and see a large crater there. We've never seen that kind of phenomenon before, so we're seeing it before our eyes, but more than that, we're learning about it almost stereoscopically. NASA has a whole flotilla of spacecraft that are observing it. So far, we're getting data back from the Hubble spacecraft, but you'll soon be seeing them from Galileo and Ulysses and Voyager and a whole host of them. We'll learn more from this than we have in the last 100 years or 1,000 years about comets and about the placement of material on our planet from celestial objects. We're also seeing remarkable explosions. Bear in mind that Jupiter is so far from the sun that its normal temperature is about minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And yet these implosions, these crashes of, after all, an iceberg are rising the temperature there to something like 2 to 3 times the surface temperature of the sun. It's just extraordinary.
Michael, we only have about 25 seconds left. Spacecraft Galileo is going to eventually show us pictures from the other side, pictures of the meteor actually hitting. What's that going to give us?
It's going to give us a front row seat. I mean, if you think these pictures are terrific, it is seeing the backside of Jupiter as the impacts occur. Those pictures are expected either in late August or in September.
All right. Michael Gillen, thank you very much. Richard Berenson, always a pleasure. Thanks very much. A great many of you can vividly remember where you were exactly 25 years ago when 2 U.S. astronauts stepped onto the moon. But at the time, very few people knew that just moments before touchdown, things began going terribly wrong. When we return, a look at those nervous minutes just before touchdown.
Athlete's foot is a predator. To cure it all, you've got to kill it all. Introducing Lotramin AF spray and powder. Full prescription strength medicine that kills all causes of athlete's foot. New forms, same killer results. Lotramin AF, the killer cure.
It was the biggest project of its kind. Ford Motor Company creating a car for the world. With the Duratec V6 engine that can go 100,000 miles without a tune-up. All-speed traction control, and safety systems designed to meet 1998 standards. Our best designers and engineers from around the world have created world-class features in a more affordable class of car. The Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique, launching September.
I need coffee.
Coffee. It's Jerry! He runs the Super 8 motel. He's like all their people, friendly and helpful. Can't be a relative.
Super 8, super people, super prices at over 1,000 locations nationwide.
Next time, should your bank charge you just to use an ATM?
Plus Arnold Schwarzenegger and Home Improvements Patricia Richardson on the next Good Morning America.
Here on ABC.
Jake and I were befuddled.
Our search for Arizona had gone awry. Then some kindly strangers appeared and led us to JCPenney. And that's where we found it. Arizona. Jeans, shirts, jackets. Arizona had something for everyone. Then suddenly, the strangers vanished. Had they been wandering spirits? Who cares? At least the clothes were real. Arizona Jean Company. Only at JCPenney. Doing it right.
Growing up poor forces you to use common sense.
Born and raised in a rural farming community, Bill Morris learned how to make the most from just a little. He worked his way through Memphis State University, joined the Army's 101st Airborne, raised a family, was elected sheriff, and then mayor of Shelby County.
Tennessee needs a governor who knows the problems of working families, who's been through the struggles of making ends meet, and who will apply Tennessee common sense to Tennessee problems.
Bill Morris for governor. Common sense for Tennessee.
When it comes to value, Buick beats the imports hands down.
Oh, I see we still have some skepticism on some of our guest spaces.
Buick Regal has anti-lock brakes and a bigger V6 than Camry. Honda Accord doesn't even offer a V6.
You know, TV and radio is making a big deal out of this.
Yet Regal is priced about $2,500 less than Honda, $4,000 less than Camry.
I've never heard of such a thing. You have now.
See your better Buick dealer today.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Beautiful, just beautiful.
President Kennedy's challenge to American ingenuity ended in the Eagle's triumphant lunar landing 25 years ago today. Tonight, we take a moment to remember that historic event, but it was anything but a smooth operation. As astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin began their descent, the main computer started steering the module dangerously off course. Suddenly, alarm bells sounded and warning lights flashed.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
No problems on the trip out to the moon. In fact, it was fairly relaxed. And no problems getting into lunar orbit.
Roger, go for LOI.
The engine on the back of the mothership that was supposed to fire to get them into lunar orbit worked perfectly. And they went into lunar orbit 69 miles above the surface of the moon. The two spacecraft then came around the backside of the moon. And right away there were problems.
Apollo 11. Apollo 11.
The radio communications between Eagle and Earth were intermittent. And in mission control, Gene Kranz was having problems getting enough data from the spacecraft to tell if everything was working properly.
I worried about, was our analysis right? Did we have enough data to continue? The communication was so ratty and so broken, we would have to relay the instructions through the Mike Collins up in the command module to get the instructions down to the spacecraft.
Eagle, this is Columbia. Your go for PDI. And
Problems continued to mount up during the descent phase. We had had the communications problems. We had had the downrange air problems. We then had program alarm.
1201, roger, 1201 alarm.
When the computer alarm went off, I think it scared the hell out of us, to be perfectly honest. I think that it was something we were not expecting.
The alarms meant that the computer was saying, I have too many things to do, and if you don't lighten my workload, I may give up functioning altogether.
Now here you are at the moon, and you've got a computer that's balking, and you are there for real, and you damn well better make the right decision, because the whole world's looking at you, and the whole United States is depending upon you.
Eagle was only 1,000 feet above the moon, and when Armstrong looked outside, he saw that the computer was steering them towards a crater the size of a football field, and all around it were boulders the size of small cars.
You're looking out the window, you know what your instrumentation says, you know the kind of information your computer is giving you, you know how much fuel you've got left, and you know something no one else knows as to whether that's a suitable landing site.
So at that point, Armstrong took over control of Eagle, and he steered the spacecraft past the crater and hunted for a clear place to land.
As we watched Neil and Buzz during the descent,
and watched the alarms and watched him level off, I was thinking, you know, he's got his hand full. He's going to have to find a good area. So it was just a matter of getting there. Can he get there before his gas runs out?
540 feet down at 30, and at 15.
The total job was now being done by the crew in the spacecraft. And we had moved from being participants to spectators in this thing, and all we could do is provide advisories on fuel quantity remaining in.
75 feet, that's looking good, down a half.
We then got down to the point where somewhere between 7 and 17 seconds, I had already had the call for 15 seconds fuel, that we heard.
Contact light, okay, engine stop, ATA at a descent. Post control, both autos, descent engine command override off. Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed.
There's handles on the TVs in the console. And I had grabbed a hold of one of the handles so tight I was almost in a death grip. And then Charlie Duke came up on the loop and said,
Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Watching that very poor television picture, watching him being very careful, getting out on the porch, as we call it, and going down that ladder was a very weird experience for me for some reason. It just looked unreal. As I sat at that console, watched that picture right there in front of me, I said, God, that shook my head. I couldn't believe it was real.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hard to believe, but that incredible moment took place 25 years ago today. I'll be back in a moment.